In the heart of New York City, where life moves at a relentless pace and subway trains rattle underfoot like veins carrying blood through a concrete body, an elderly woman stepped onto a crowded train. She was small in stature but carried herself with quiet dignity. Her silver hair peeked out from beneath a knitted scarf and her hands clutched a worn leather purse close to her chest. This purse wasn't just any bag. It held everything important to her. Old photographs, a wallet filled with memories rather than riches, and a sense of security she relied on every day. The subway car buzzed with the usual chaos, people scrolling through their phones, earbuds plugged in, lost in their own worlds. Some stood holding onto poles as the train swayed gently along its tracks, while others sat slumped in their seats, avoiding eye contact. Among them was a man who seemed different. He wasn't flashy or loud, but there was something about him that made heads turn subtly when he entered the car earlier. His broad shoulders and calm demeanor gave off an air of authority, though no one knew exactly who he was yet. This man had spent most of his life in the spotlight, first as a bodybuilder, then as an action hero known for taking down villains, on the big screen, and later as a leader in politics. But today, he was simply another passenger riding the subway after wrapping up work on a film set nearby. He chose this mode of transport because it reminded him of simpler times when he too struggled to make ends meet before fame found him. As he leaned against the wall of the subway car, he observed the scene around him, noticing details others might overlook. Meanwhile, the elderly woman stood near the doors, gripping the metal pole tightly as the train rattled forward. Across from her, a younger man sat hunched over, his hoodie pulled low over his face. His eyes darted around nervously, scanning the crowd. At first glance, he looked like any other commuter trying to blend in, but if you paid closer attention, you'd notice his restless feet tapping against the floor. There was tension in the way he shifted his weight, almost as if he were waiting for the perfect moment to act. Unbeknownst to the elderly woman, this young man had been watching her since she boarded the train. He saw how carefully she held her purse, how she glanced around cautiously every few seconds. To him, she looked vulnerable, an easy target. The thief had been planning this for days, studying people's habits during rush hour, learning which ones carried valuables and which ones didn't put up much of a fight. Today, he decided, would be the day to strike. He convinced himself that what he was about to do wasn't personal. It was just business. As the train approached the next station, the atmosphere shifted slightly. The brakes squealed and the car jolted as it came to a stop. It was in this brief moment of distraction that the thief made his move. With swift precision, he reached out and snatched the purse from the elderly woman's grip. She gasped, her fingers brushing against the strap as it slipped away. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. Then reality crashed back in and she cried out, "Stop him!" Her voice trembled with fear and desperation, cutting through the hum of conversations and the mechanical whir of the train. The thief didn't look back. He bolted toward the open doors, shoving past startled passengers as he pushed his way onto the platform. People stumbled aside, unsure whether to react or stay out of harm's way. Most froze, paralyzed by surprise or fear. A few muttered angrily under their breath, but no one dared to step forward. After all, intervening could mean risking injury, or worse. The thief knew this, and it fueled his confidence as he sprinted toward the stairs leading out of the station. But not everyone stayed silent. From the corner of the car, a deep voice rang out, commanding and firm. "Hey!" All eyes turned to see the man who had been leaning against the wall now standing tall, his presence suddenly impossible to ignore. It was Arnold Schwarzenegger, though many on the train wouldn't realize it until later. For now, they only saw a figure exuding strength and determination, moving with purpose as he stepped into the thief's path. The thief hesitated for a fraction of a second, caught off guard by the unexpected confrontation. Their eyes met briefly. Arnold's unwavering gaze locking onto the thief's wide-eyed panic. Then, without wasting another moment, Arnold sprang into action. He moved quickly, his strides long and powerful, closing the gap between himself and the fleeing criminal. Commuters spilled out of the train behind him, some cheering, others whispering in disbelief. The chase was on, and for the first time, In years, Arnold felt the adrenaline rush of being in the thick of things again. Continued. The thief's heart pounded as he bolted up the stairs, his hoodie bouncing with each frantic step. He could hear the heavy footfalls behind him, growing louder and closer with every second. For a moment, disbelief clouded his mind. Was someone really chasing him? Most people would have stayed back, too afraid to get involved. But this guy wasn't backing down. The thief glanced over his shoulder and saw the determined figure closing in. It was then that panic fully set in. Arnold moved with surprising speed for a man of his size and age. His years of training in bodybuilding and martial arts had taught him how to channel strength into agility. Each stride he took was deliberate, powerful, and calculated. He wasn't just running after the thief. He was strategizing, planning his next move. Around them, commuters scrambled out of the way, some shouting encouragement while others simply stared in awe. The scene felt surreal, like something straight out of one of Arnold's action movies. But this was real life, raw and unpredictable. As they reached the top of the stairs, the thief made a sharp turn toward the exit, nearly colliding with a group of teenagers loitering near the ticket machines. They jumped aside, startled by the sudden commotion. One of them shouted, "What's going on?" But neither the thief nor Arnold slowed down to explain. The thief pushed open the heavy glass doors leading outside, emerging onto the busy street. Beyond, horns blared and pedestrians hurried along the sidewalk, oblivious to the drama unfolding behind them. Outside, the thief zigzagged through the crowd, using every trick he knew to shake off his pursuer. He ducked under a fruit vendor's cart, sending apples rolling across the pavement. He weaved between parked cars, hoping to lose Arnold in the chaos, but Arnold didn't falter. He vaulted over the fallen fruit, ignoring the vendor's annoyed shouts, and kept his focus locked on the fleeing figure ahead. To him, this wasn't just about catching a criminal. It was about standing up for what was right, even when no one else dared to. For a brief moment, the thief thought he might actually escape. He spotted an alleyway up ahead and veered toward it, thinking the narrow space would slow Arnold down. But as he sprinted into the shadows, he realized his mistake. The alley was a dead end, blocked by a chain-link fence too high to climb quickly. Trapped, he spun around, panting heavily, his chest heaving as he faced his pursuer. Arnold stood at the entrance of the alley, his breathing steady despite the chase. "You're not going anywhere," Arnold said firmly, his voice carrying a tone of authority that left no room for argument. The thief backed up against the fence, his eyes darting wildly, searching for another way out. But there was none. Desperation bubbled inside him, and he lunged forward, trying to shove past Arnold. It was a reckless move, born out of fear rather than strategy. Arnold sidestepped easily, grabbing the thief's arm mid-motion and twisting it behind his back. The purse fell from the thief's grip, landing softly on the ground. "Stay down," Arnold instructed, pressing the thief against the fence with controlled force. The younger man struggled, thrashing and cursing under his breath, but it was futile. Arnold's hold was unbreakable, a testament to decades of discipline and physical training. Within moments, the fight drained out of the thief, leaving him slumped against the fence, defeated. Back at the subway station, word of the chase spread quickly among the passengers who had witnessed the initial theft. Some followed the commotion outside, eager to see how it would end. Others stayed behind, comforting the elderly woman whose purse had been stolen. She sat on a bench, her hands trembling as she tried to compose herself. A kind stranger handed her a tissue, and another offered reassuring words. Despite the shock of the moment, the small acts of kindness reminded her that she wasn't alone. When police officers arrived, alerted by calls from bystanders, they found Arnold still holding the thief securely in the alley. Flashing their badges, they approached cautiously, guns drawn until they assessed the situation. Once they realized Arnold posed no threat, one officer stepped forward. "Sir, can you explain what happened here?" he asked, eyeing the scene with a mix of confusion and admiration. Arnold released the thief into the officer's custody, stepping back as they cuffed him. "He stole a purse from an elderly woman on the subway," Arnold explained matter-of-factly. "I chased him down and stopped him before he could get away." The officers exchanged glances, clearly impressed. One of them chuckled, shaking, his head. Looks like we've got a real-life hero on our hands. News of the incident began to ripple outward almost immediately. Bystanders pulled out their phones, capturing photos and videos of Arnold speaking with the officers. Someone posted footage of the chase online, and within minutes, social media lit up with reactions. Comments flooded in praising Arnold's bravery and calling him a symbol of hope in a world often plagued by apathy. Hashtags like "our subway hero" and "real-life action star" started trending, drawing attention from news outlets across the country. Meanwhile, back at the station, the elderly woman retrieved her purse from Arnold, tears streaming down her face. She clutched it tightly to her chest, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You saved me today." Arnold smiled warmly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's my honor," he replied. "No one should have to go through what you experienced." As the police led the thief away, the crowd dispersed slowly, buzzing with excitement and disbelief. People shook their heads, marveling at what they had just witnessed. Some approached Arnold, thanking him for his courage, while others simply nodded in respect. For many, the encounter served as a reminder that heroes aren't always fictional. Characters in movies, they exist in real life, ready to step up when needed most. Continued. By the time the police finished their initial questioning, a small crowd had gathered around Arnold and the elderly woman. People whispered among themselves, pointing discreetly at the man who had just taken down a thief with such calm authority. Some recognized him immediately. After all, his face was iconic, known to millions around the world. But others were slower to connect the dots. One young man in a baseball cap finally blurted out, "Wait, is that Arnold Schwarzenegger?" The question hung in the air for a moment before someone else shouted, "It is him." A ripple of excitement spread through the group, and soon people were pulling out their phones to snap pictures or ask for selfies. Arnold handled the attention with grace, smiling politely as he posed for photos and shook hands. But his focus never strayed far from the elderly woman standing beside him. She looked shaken but grateful, her grip on her purse tighter than ever. Every so often, she would glance up at Arnold, still unable to believe what had happened. "I can't thank you enough," she said again, her voice trembling slightly. "You didn't have to do that." Arnold leaned down slightly to meet her gaze, his expression softening. "Of course I did," he replied. "What kind of person would I be if I let something like this happen and didn't try to stop it? Everyone deserves to feel safe." His words carried weight, not just because of who he was, but because they came from a place of genuine conviction. It wasn't about fame or glory. It was about doing the right thing, even when it required effort. The commotion died down. An officer approached Arnold and asked if he'd be willing to come to the station later to file a formal statement. Arnold nodded without hesitation. "Whatever you need," he said. Then, turning back to the elderly woman, he added, "And make sure she gets home safely, okay? None of us should leave her alone after this." The officers assured him they'd arrange for someone to escort her home, and Arnold seemed satisfied with that. Still, he lingered for a few more minutes, ensuring she felt comfortable before stepping away. As he walked toward the exit, the crowd parted respectfully, many offering nods of appreciation. Someone called out, "We need more people like you." Arnold turned and gave a thumbs up, flashing his trademark grin. "Just remember," he said, raising his voice slightly so everyone could hear, "anyone can be a hero. All it takes is deciding to act." Outside the station, reporters began arriving, alerted by social media posts and eyewitness accounts. Cameras flashed and microphones were thrust into Arnold's face as journalists clamored for details. "What made you step in today?" One reporter asked. Another chimed in. "Did you think twice before chasing the thief?" Arnold held up a hand, signaling for them to wait while he gathered his thoughts. When he spoke, his tone was measured and sincere. "I didn't think twice," he admitted. "When I saw that woman being robbed, my only thought was to stop it. I've spent my life learning how to protect others, whether it's on screen or off, and today, I used those skills where they mattered most. This isn't about me, though. It's about reminding ourselves that we all have a responsibility to look out for each other. If we see something wrong, we should speak up or take action. That's how we make the world better. His words resonated deeply, not just with the reporters, but with the bystanders who had gathered to listen. In a city often criticized for its indifference, Arnold's actions stood out as a beacon of hope. People began sharing stories of times they wished they'd intervened but hadn't, vowing silently to do better next time. For some, seeing a global icon act with such humility and courage inspired a renewed sense of faith in humanity. Later that evening, video clips of the incident went viral online. Social media platforms buzzed with reactions, ranging from admiration to awe. One clip showed Arnold calmly confronting the thief on the subway platform, his towering figure exuding confidence. Another captured the chase itself, with bystanders cheering him on as he pursued the criminal. Memes popped up almost instantly, poking fun at the irony of stealing from someone under Arnold Schwarzenegger's watchful eye. One popular post read, "Next time pickpockets, check your surroundings before committing crimes." Talk shows and news programs scrambled to book Arnold for interviews, eager to hear his perspective on the event. Producers reached out to the elderly woman as well, hoping to share her side of the story. Both declined most requests, preferring to keep the focus on the message rather than the spectacle. However, Arnold did agree to appear on a morning show a few days later, not to brag about his heroic deed but to encourage others to stand up against injustice. During the interview, the host asked him if he ever felt nervous during the chase. Arnold chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Nervous? No. Excited? Yes. It reminded me of my bodybuilding days, actually. When you train hard, you learn to trust your instincts and push past fear. And honestly, adrenaline kicks in too. You don't have time to think about being scared, you just move." He went on to emphasize the importance of community and solidarity. We live in a fast-paced world where it's easy to ignore problems that don't directly affect us, but imagine if everyone took a moment to help someone in need. Imagine how much stronger we'd be as a society. Today, I happen to be there, but tomorrow, it could be any of you. So don't wait for a hero. Be the hero. The audience erupted in applause, moved by his heartfelt plea. Backstage, producers noted how rare it was for a celebrity to use their platform so selflessly. Most guests focused on promoting projects or boosting their image, but Arnold had chosen to highlight a greater cause: the power of collective action. Meanwhile, the elderly woman returned to her quiet life, forever changed by the events of that day. Neighbors and friends visited her, bringing food and flowers as gestures of support. Though she preferred to stay out of the spotlight, she couldn't deny the impact Arnold's intervention had on her outlook. "It restored my faith in people," she told a local reporter during a brief interview. "For a moment, I thought the worst of humanity had won. But then someone proved me wrong. Someone showed me that kindness and bravery still exist," continued. The days following the subway incident brought a wave of attention that neither Arnold nor the elderly woman had anticipated. News outlets couldn't get enough of the story. How a Hollywood legend turned real-life hero had stepped in to stop a crime on a crowded train. Social media continued to buzz, with people sharing clips, memes, and heartfelt posts about the importance of standing up for others. But while the world celebrated Arnold's actions, the elderly woman found herself reflecting on something deeper: the kindness of strangers. For her, it wasn't just about getting her purse back. It was about feeling seen and valued in a moment, when she felt most vulnerable. She thought about how the other passengers had comforted her after the theft, offering tissues, words of reassurance, and even staying with her until help arrived. These small acts of compassion reminded her that humanity wasn't lost, even in a city as chaotic as New York. And then there was Arnold, someone who could have easily ignored the situation, but instead chose to step in without hesitation. 1. Evening. Sitting alone in her cozy apartment, she pulled out an old photo album. Flipping through the pages, she smiled at memories of her late husband, her children, and moments from decades past. Her hands lingered on a picture of herself as a young woman full of energy and dreams. Life had changed so much since then, but one thing remained constant: the belief that people were inherently good, even if they sometimes needed reminders. The events of that day reinforced this belief, giving her a renewed sense of hope. Meanwhile, Arnold returned to his routine, balancing work commitments with personal time. He didn't dwell on the incident, treating it as simply another chapter in a life dedicated to helping others. Friends and colleagues teased him lightly about becoming a viral sensation, but he brushed it off with his characteristic humor. "What can I say?" he joked during a meeting. "I guess I'm still chasing bad guys, just not on set anymore." Still, the experience stayed with him. It made him reflect on the power of influence, not the kind that comes from fame or wealth, but the kind that stems from leading by example. Growing up in Austria, he'd learned early on that success wasn't just about achieving goals. It was about using those achievements to make a difference. Whether it was mentoring young athletes, advocating for environmental causes, or simply being present in moments like the one on the subway, he believed everyone had a role to play in creating a better world. A few weeks later, the elderly woman decided to reach out to Arnold. With the help of a neighbor, she wrote a heartfelt letter thanking him once again for what he had done. In it, she shared how his actions had inspired her to reconnect with old friends and family members she hadn't spoken to in years. She also invited him to join her for dinner sometime, saying she wanted to express her gratitude in person. When Arnold received the letter, he was touched by its sincerity. Without hesitation, he accepted the invitation. The dinner took place at a quiet Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, chosen because it was close to the woman's home. Arnold arrived dressed casually, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, eager to keep the evening low-key. The hostess led him to a private corner table where the elderly woman and her 2 adult children were already seated. They stood up as he approached, their faces lighting up with smiles. "This is such an honor," one of the children said, shaking Arnold's hand warmly. "Thank you for everything you did for our mom." The elderly woman nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "We owe you more than we can ever say," she added softly. Arnold waved off their praise, pulling out a chair to sit down. "Please, let's not talk about me tonight," he said with a grin. "Tell me about yourselves." And that's exactly what they did. Over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, they shared stories about their lives, the challenges they'd faced, the joys they'd experienced, and the lessons they'd learned along the way. Arnold listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and laughing at their jokes. For a man accustomed to commanding rooms and delivering speeches, he seemed perfectly content letting them take center stage. At one point, the conversation turned to the subway incident. The elderly woman's son leaned forward, curiosity in his voice. "I have to ask, what went through your mind when you saw that guy running with my mom's purse? Weren't you worried about getting hurt?" Arnold paused, considering the question. "To be honest, no," he replied. "When you see something wrong happening, you don't think about yourself. You think about stopping it. Fear doesn't come into play because you're focused on the bigger picture. Plus," he added with a chuckle, "I've been in enough action movies to know how these things work." Everyone laughed, breaking the tension. But beneath the humor lay a profound truth. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to act despite it. That night around the table, they all understood this in a new way. As dessert was served, the elderly woman raised her glass in a toast. "To heroes," she said, her voice steady and warm. "Not the ones in capes or on movie screens, but the ones who show up when it matters most. Thank you, Arnold, for reminding us that true strength lies in protecting others." Arnold lifted his glass, meeting her gaze with a look of deep respect. "And thank you," he said, "for reminding me why it's worth doing." The rest of the evening passed in laughter and warmth, leaving everyone feeling a little lighter, a little more connected. As they said their goodbyes outside the restaurant, Arnold hugged the elderly woman tightly. "Take care of yourself," he told her. "And remember, you're stronger than you think." Walking away, he felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't expected. It wasn't the applause or recognition that mattered. It was knowing he had made a difference, however small, in someone else's life. And perhaps in doing so, he had reminded others to do the same. Continued. The days after the dinner at the Italian restaurant brought a quiet sense of reflection for everyone involved. For the elderly woman, life began to feel lighter, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had been lifted. She started taking small steps to reconnect with the world around her, calling old friends, visiting neighbors, and even signing up for a weekly book club at the local library. The incident on the subway had shaken her, but it also reminded her of something important. She wasn't alone. There were good people everywhere, ready to help if given the chance. Her children noticed the change too. They saw how their mother seemed more animated, more willing to share stories from her past. One afternoon, while helping her clean out a closet, they stumbled upon an old scrapbook filled with newspaper clippings and photos. Among them was a faded article about Arnold Schwarzenegger's early bodybuilding days. "I remember reading about him when I was younger," she said, smiling wistfully. "Who would have thought he'd end up playing such a big role in my life?" Her son laughed. "Mom, you've got to admit it's kind of wild. Out of all the people on that train, it just happened to be him." She nodded, her eyes twinkling. Maybe it wasn't luck. Maybe it was meant to happen. Meanwhile, Arnold went back to his busy schedule, juggling meetings, workouts, and public appearances. But the memory of that night at the restaurant stayed with him. It wasn't often he met someone who reminded him so vividly of his own parents, people who valued kindness, resilience, and humility above all else. He found himself thinking about the elderly woman during quiet moments, wondering how she was doing. Was she feeling safer now? Had the experience changed her perspective on life? One day, while scrolling through emails, he came across a note from the family thanking him again for the dinner. Attached was a photo of the four of them together, smiling warmly under the soft glow of the restaurant's lights. Arnold smiled as he looked at it, struck by how much warmth and gratitude radiated from such a simple image. He decided right then that he wanted to stay in touch, not because it would make headlines or boost his image, but because it felt meaningful. A few weeks later, Arnold sent the elderly woman a handwritten letter. In it, he thanked her for inviting him into her home and sharing her story. "You reminded me of what truly matters," he wrote. "Family, community, and the courage to keep going no matter what challenges come your way. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you ever need anything. I'm here for you." When the letter arrived, the elderly woman read it aloud to her children, tears streaming down her face. "He really is one of a kind," she said softly. Her daughter hugged her tightly, whispering, "So are you, Mom." As time passed, the bond between them grew stronger. They exchanged occasional letters and phone calls, catching up on each other's lives. During one call, Arnold asked if she'd like to attend a charity event he was hosting, a fundraiser for programs supporting seniors living independently. The elderly woman hesitated at first, unsure if she'd feel comfortable being in the spotlight. But Arnold reassured her, saying, "You're not just a guest, you're part of the reason this event exists." On the evening of the fundraiser, she arrived dressed in a modest yet elegant outfit, her silver hair neatly styled. Arnold greeted her personally at the entrance, looping her arm through his as they walked inside. Cameras flashed, capturing their unlikely friendship for the world to see. Guests whispered among themselves, marveling at the connection between the Hollywood icon and the humble grandmother. To them, it was proof that greatness isn't defined by fame or fortune. It's measured by the impact we have on others. Ibs. During his speech, Arnold took a moment to acknowledge her presence. "Tonight I want to honor someone very special," he said, gesturing toward her. "This incredible woman taught me something valuable, that heroism isn't always loud or flashy. Sometimes it's quiet and unassuming, like deciding to stand up for someone in need. And sometimes it's about reminding us all that we're stronger together." The room erupted in applause, and the elderly woman stood up, waving shyly as tears filled her eyes. Later, guests lined up to meet her, eager to hear her side of the story. She spoke softly but confidently, sharing how the events of that day had inspired her to embrace life fully once again. "We all have the power to make a difference," she told them. "Whether it's stopping a thief or simply lending a listening ear. Every act of kindness matters. By the end of the evening, donations poured in, far exceeding expectations. Organizers credited both Arnold's star power and the elderly woman's heartfelt message for the success of the event. As they left the venue together, Arnold turned to her with a smile. "See, you're making waves too." She chuckled, shaking her head. "I think you're giving me too much credit, but thank you for everything." Their friendship became a symbol of hope, showing that connections can form in the most unexpected ways. People began sharing their own stories of unlikely friendships and acts of kindness inspired by the pair. Teachers used their story in classrooms to teach students about empathy and courage. Even strangers struck up conversations on subways and buses, recalling how one man's decision to step in had sparked a ripple effect of positivity. For Arnold, the experience reinforced his belief in the importance of using his platform wisely. Fame, he realized, wasn't about basking in admiration. It was about creating opportunities to inspire others. Whether it was mentoring young athletes, advocating for environmental causes, or simply being present in moments like this, he knew his legacy would be shaped by the lives he touched along the way. And for the elderly woman, the journey had transformed her. She no longer saw herself as just another face in the crowd. She recognized her ability to influence others, however subtly. Her purse, once a symbol of vulnerability, now represented strength, the strength to move forward, to trust again, and to believe in the goodness of humanity. Continued. As weeks turned into months, the bond between Arnold and the elderly woman continued to grow, becoming a source of inspiration not just for them, but for everyone around them. Their friendship wasn't flashy or loud. It was built on shared values, mutual respect, and an unspoken understanding that life is richer when we lift each other up. For Arnold, it was a reminder of why he had always valued humility over fame. For the elderly woman, it was proof that even in moments of fear and uncertainty, there are people willing to step forward and make things right. One crisp autumn afternoon, Arnold received a call from her son. "Mom wanted me to invite you to Thanksgiving dinner," he said warmly. "She's been talking about it nonstop. Says she wants to thank you properly, with food." Arnold laughed, touched by the gesture. "Tell her I wouldn't miss it for the world." On Thanksgiving Day, Arnold arrived at their home carrying a tray of homemade pumpkin pies, his attempt at contributing to the meal. The house smelled of roasted turkey, stuffing, and cinnamon-spiced cider, filling the air with warmth and comfort. Inside, the family buzzed with excitement, setting the table and preparing dishes while laughter echoed through the rooms. When the elderly woman saw him walk in, she beamed, rushing over to hug him tightly. "You came," she exclaimed, her voice brimming with joy. "Of course I did," Arnold replied, handing her the pies. "And don't worry, I didn't bake them myself. My assistant helped." Everyone laughed, easing any lingering nerves about having such a famous guest join them for the holiday. The meal was lively, filled with stories, jokes, and heartfelt conversations. At one point, the elderly woman stood up, raising her glass for a toast. "Thanksgiving is about gratitude," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "And this year, I have so much to be thankful for. I'm grateful for my family, for good health, and most of all for meeting someone who reminded me what it means to stand strong and kind in the face of adversity." Arnold raised his glass too, smiling warmly. "To new beginnings," he said simply. "And to never underestimating the power of a single act of kindness." After dinner, they gathered in the living room, sipping coffee and sharing memories. The elderly woman pulled out an old photo album, flipping through pages filled with pictures of her younger days. She paused at one of herself as a child, standing proudly beside her parents outside their small farmhouse. "This was us before we moved to the city," she explained. "Life was simpler back then, but the lessons I learned stayed with me forever. Work hard, treat others well, and never lose hope." Arnold listened intently, nodding along. "Those are timeless principles," he said. "They're the same ones my parents taught me growing up. No matter where you come from or what challenges you face, those values guide you." Their conversation shifted to lighter topics: favorite movies, travel adventures, and funny mishaps over the years. One story led to another until time seemed to slip away unnoticed. By the end of the evening, Arnold felt more connected to this family than he ever imagined possible. They weren't just hosts. They were friends who welcomed him into their lives without hesitation. Back in his own routine, Arnold found himself drawing strength from these interactions. In a world often dominated by noise and chaos, moments like these grounded him. He realized how easy it was to get caught up in deadlines, meetings, and obligations. But true fulfillment came from relationships, from knowing he'd made a positive impact on someone's life. Word of their friendship spread further, inspiring others to reflect on their own connections. A local newspaper wrote a feature article titled, "From Subway to Supper, An Unlikely Bond That Changed Lives," highlighting how two strangers brought together by chance had created something meaningful. Readers responded with overwhelming enthusiasm, sharing their own stories of unlikely friendships and acts of kindness sparked by the pair's example. One letter stood out to Arnold in particular. It came from a young man named Kevin, who described himself as shy and unsure of his place in the world. "Your story gave me hope," Kevin wrote. "I've always wanted to help people, but I thought I needed to be extraordinary to make a difference. Now I know that even small actions can change lives, including mine." Arnold called Kevin personally, surprising him with encouragement and advice. "You don't need to wait for the perfect moment," Arnold told him. "Start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. Trust me, it adds up." Inspired by the response, Arnold decided to take things a step further. He partnered with community organizations to launch a campaign promoting everyday heroism, encouraging people to look out for one another, whether it was helping a neighbor carry groceries or speaking up when they saw injustice. Posters went up in subway stations across New York City, featuring a picture of Arnold alongside the slogan, "Be the hero someone needs today." The campaign resonated deeply, especially among commuters who remembered the subway incident vividly. Some passengers began leaving notes of encouragement on trains, while others started volunteering at local shelters or mentoring youth in underserved neighborhoods. What began as one act of bravery had blossomed into a movement, a reminder that anyone could be a force for good if they chose to act. For the elderly woman, seeing the ripple effect of that day brought immense satisfaction. She started volunteering at a senior center near her apartment, leading workshops on storytelling and resilience. Her message was simple yet powerful. We all have stories worth sharing, and when we share them, we remind ourselves and others that we're not alone. Her newfound confidence inspired her children to follow suit. Her daughter began organizing neighborhood cleanup events, while her son mentored teenagers interested in fitness and athletics. Together, they proved that kindness is contagious. It spreads quietly but surely, touching hearts and changing lives. By spring, the unlikely duo had become ambassadors for a broader initiative aimed at fostering connection and compassion within communities. They spoke at schools, attended charity galas, and participated in panel discussions, always emphasizing the importance of looking out for one another. Each appearance reinforced their belief that heroism isn't reserved for superheroes. It belongs to anyone willing to care. Through it all, Arnold and the elderly woman remained steadfast in their commitment to staying humble. Neither sought recognition for their efforts. Instead, they focused on uplifting others, proving that true greatness lies not in accolades but in action. Continued. As summer approached, the bond between Arnold and the elderly woman deepened even further. Their friendship had evolved into something that felt almost familial, a connection rooted not in shared history, but in shared values. They spoke regularly, on the phone, exchanged letters filled with updates about their lives, and occasionally met for coffee or lunch. To outsiders, it might have seemed like an unlikely pairing, a global icon and a quiet grandmother who preferred knitting to red carpets, but to them none of that mattered. What mattered was the mutual respect and trust they had built. One sunny afternoon, Arnold surprised her by showing up at her apartment unannounced. He knocked on the door holding a potted plant. A small fern, he said, reminded him of resilience, because it could thrive in tough conditions. "I thought your windowsill needed some green," he joked as she opened the door, her face lighting up with surprise. "Well, aren't you full of surprises?" she teased, stepping aside to let him in. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender, and sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting golden patterns across the wooden floor. On the table sat a half-finished quilt, its vibrant colors stitched together with care. She gestured toward it proudly. "I've been working on this for my granddaughter. It's slow going, but I think she'll love it." Arnold admired the craftsmanship, running his fingers lightly over the fabric. "You're talented," he said sincerely. "It reminds me of my mother. She used to sew all our clothes when we were kids. Every stitch told a story." They spent the next hour chatting about hobbies, traditions, and the simple joys of creating something with your own hands. For Arnold, these moments were grounding, a reminder that success wasn't measured by trophies or titles but by the richness of human connections. And for her, having someone listen so attentively validated her experiences and passions in ways she hadn't expected. Later that week, she decided to return the favor. She invited Arnold to join her for a stroll through Central Park, one of her favorite places in the city. When they arrived, the park was alive with activity: children chasing pigeons, couples lounging on blankets, musicians playing guitars under shady trees. As they walked along the winding paths, she pointed out spots that held special meaning for her: a bench where she used to sit with her late husband, a flower garden that bloomed every spring, and a pond where ducks gathered noisily. At one point, they stopped near a group of teenagers practicing skateboarding tricks. One boy kept falling off his board, frustration evident on his face. Without hesitation, Arnold approached him, offering advice with a warm smile. "Keep your balance low," he suggested, "and don't be afraid to fall. It's how you learn." The boy looked up, starstruck, before nodding shyly and trying again. This time, he landed the trick, pumping his fist triumphantly as his friends cheered. Watching from a distance, the elderly woman smiled. "You really can't help yourself, can you?" she said when Arnold rejoined her. "Always teaching, always helping." He shrugged, grinning. "If I see a chance to make someone's day better, why not take it?" Their walk continued, punctuated by laughter and reflections on life. At one point, she turned to him thoughtfully. "You know, I never imagined I'd meet someone like you. Not just famous, but genuinely kind. It's rare, especially these days." Arnold paused, looking at her intently. "Kindness isn't rare," he replied. "It's just sometimes hidden behind fear or doubt. People want to help, they just need permission to start." Her words stayed with him long after their walk ended. That evening, sitting alone in his study, he reflected on how much her perspective had shaped his own. She saw the world through a lens of gratitude and hope, qualities he admired deeply. In turn, she often remarked how his confidence and willingness to act inspired her to step outside her comfort zone. Inspired by their conversations, Arnold began incorporating more personal stories into his public appearances. Instead of focusing solely on achievements or politics, he started talking about the lessons he'd learned from ordinary people, the elderly woman included. Audiences responded warmly, connecting with the authenticity of his message. One listener wrote to him afterward saying, "Your story reminded me that heroes aren't perfect, they're human. And that gives me hope." Meanwhile, the elderly woman continued finding ways to give back. Her volunteer work at the senior center expanded, and she started hosting weekly storytelling sessions where residents could share memories and wisdom. Many attendees described feeling seen and valued for the first time in years. Word spread quickly, attracting visitors from neighboring communities. Soon, local schools began bringing students to listen, fostering intergenerational connections. One day during one of these sessions, a young girl raised her hand timidly. "Can I ask something?" she said softly. When the elderly woman nodded, the girl asked, "Were you ever scared? Like, really scared?" The room fell silent as everyone waited for her response. She took a deep breath, thinking carefully before answering. "Of course I was," she admitted. "There were times when I felt like the world was too big, too scary to handle. But then I realized something important. You don't have to face it alone. There are always people willing to help, if you let them. Even on my worst day, I found someone who cared enough to step in. Her answer moved many in the room to tears, including Arnold, who happened to be visiting that day. Afterward, he pulled her aside privately. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. "You should write it down. Share it with the world." She laughed, shaking her head. "Oh, I'm no writer. Besides, my story isn't that interesting." "It is to me," he insisted, "and to everyone whose life you've touched." Encouraged by his words, she eventually started jotting down notes about her experiences, not for fame, but as a way to preserve the lessons she'd learned. Over time, those notes grew into a collection of reflections she titled Threads of Strength. Each chapter wove together themes of resilience, kindness, and community, using anecdotes from her life to illustrate universal truths. When the book was finally published, Arnold attended the launch event, standing proudly beside her as she signed copies for eager readers. "This is your moment," he whispered. "Enjoy it." By the end of the evening, hundreds of books had been sold, and countless attendees left inspired by her courage and humility. For her, the success wasn't about sales. It was about knowing she'd contributed something meaningful to the world. Continued. As the seasons changed and autumn painted the city in hues of gold and crimson, the bond between Arnold and the elderly woman reached a new depth. Their friendship had become a cornerstone in both their lives, a source of joy, inspiration, and mutual learning. They weren't just two people brought together by chance. They were companions who reminded each other of life's beauty, resilience, and interconnectedness. And now, as her book gained traction and his advocacy work grew, they found themselves standing side by side on a shared mission to inspire others to see the hero within themselves. One crisp October morning, Arnold received an invitation that made him smile, an official request from a local community center asking if he'd speak at their annual Heroes Among Us event. The theme was simple yet profound, celebrating ordinary people doing extraordinary things. When he called the elderly woman to share the news, she immediately chimed in with excitement. "You have to do it," she urged. "And maybe I could come too. Just to watch." "Not just to watch," Arnold corrected gently. "To be part of it. You're one of the heroes we're celebrating." Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but she couldn't hide her delight. For someone who had spent most of her life quietly, contributing without seeking recognition, the idea of being acknowledged felt surreal and deeply moving. On the day of the event, the community center buzzed with energy. Families, students, volunteers, and local leaders filled the auditorium, eager to hear stories of courage and compassion. Posters adorned the walls, featuring quotes like, "Kindness is contagious," and "Every act matters." At the entrance, a display showcased thank you notes written by community members, highlighting acts of kindness they'd witnessed or experienced, a testament to how far their movement had come. When Arnold took the stage, the crowd erupted into applause. He waved warmly, motioning for them to quiet down before beginning his speech. "Thank you all for being here today," he started, his voice steady and sincere. "But let me make one thing clear. I'm not the hero of this story. None of us are heroes because of titles or accomplishments. We're heroes when we choose to care, to act, to step up, even when it's hard." He paused, glancing toward the wings where the elderly woman waited nervously. "Today I want to introduce you to someone who embodies what true heroism looks like. She doesn't wear a cape or carry a weapon. Instead, she carries something far more powerful: hope, resilience, and a belief in the goodness of humanity. Please welcome my friend, the real hero of this story." The audience turned as she walked onto the stage, her steps slow but steady. Arnold met her halfway, offering his arm to guide her to the podium. As she stood there, microphone in hand, the room fell silent. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was strong. "I never thought I'd stand here today," she began, her words soft but heartfelt. "I've lived a quiet life, always believing that the little things matter, like holding a door open, listening to someone who needs to talk, or simply saying thank you. But then something happened to me that changed everything. A stranger stepped in when I needed help most. That stranger taught me that bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about acting despite fear. She looked over at Arnold, her eyes glistening with gratitude. Because of him, I learned to embrace life again, to trust, to connect, and to give back. And because of all of you, I've seen how kindness spreads. One small act can create ripples that touch countless lives. The crowd erupted into applause, many rising to their feet. Some wiped away tears while others nodded in agreement. It was a moment that transcended speeches. It was a celebration of humanity's capacity to care. Afterward, attendees lined up to meet both of them, sharing their own stories of kindness and courage. A young boy handed Arnold a drawing of a muscular figure stopping a thief captioned, "My hero." Nearby, a grandmother hugged the elderly woman tightly, whispering, "Your story gave me hope. Thank you." That night, as they sat together reflecting on the day, Arnold turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "Do you realize what you've done?" he asked. "You've inspired so many people, including me." She shook her head, smiling modestly. "No, Arnold, we've done it together. You showed me strength, and I reminded you of simplicity. Together, we've shown people that anyone can make a difference." Their partnership continued to flourish, inspiring initiatives across the country. Schools adopted programs encouraging students to perform random acts of kindness, businesses implemented policies supporting employees' volunteer efforts, and neighborhoods organized events fostering connection and empathy. What began as a single act of bravery on a subway train had grown into a nationwide movement, a reminder that heroes don't exist in isolation. They thrive in communities. Years later, when asked about the legacy of their friendship, Arnold summed it up perfectly. "It's not about fame or recognition. It's about leaving the world better than you found it and knowing you didn't have to do it alone." For the elderly woman, the journey reaffirmed her faith in humanity. She often said, "We're all threads in the same quilt. Alone, we might seem fragile, but woven together, we create something strong, beautiful, and enduring." And so, their story came full circle, not as a tale of theft and justice, but as a testament to the power of connection, courage, and kindness. In a world that sometimes feels divided, they proved that even the smallest acts of love and bravery can bridge gaps, heal wounds, and remind us of our shared humanity.